Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi, I'm Nick, founder and CEO at Voodoo.
And I'm Paul, Chief Growth Officer at Voodoo. Today's guest has played a pivotal role in shaping Australia's retail media landscape. As Commercial Director, Retail Media at Epsilon and the inaugural Chair of the IAB Australia Retail Media Council, he's driving standards, educating the market, and helping define what comes next.
And before that, he helped set up Cash Rewards' retail media arm Circuit, launched Mixin at Endeavour Group, and rolled out Critio's retail media offering across APAC.
Now that's a serious resume. With more than 20 years in digital advertising and retail media innovation, Lachlan Brahe knows this space better than most and is here to share where it's heading. So Lachlan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Lachlan, great to have you on board. You have led retail media initiatives across IPG media brands, Critio, Endeavour, Cash Rewards. Like, you've had an amazing career. Looking back, what are some of the key changes that you can identify throughout the course of your career? Because I'm sure you've seen a few, especially where we are now. What stood out to you?
This is like this is your life, Lachlan Brahe.
It is. It is.
That's awesome. Look, I would say the most marked change that I would have seen in those illustrious 7 years in retail media, probably just the proliferation of new networks over a relatively short space of time around APAC. So I used to joke with the team at Media Brands way back in the day. We had more people accredited to use the Amazon DSP than Amazon had staff in Australia at the time. And it's just gone from strength to strength then. I think we traded with probably 3 networks around 2018. I mean, since then I've been, as your background said, I've built 2 of them, and I think there's probably close to 20 across Australia and New Zealand now. So I think you've got that growth on one side, and on the other side, there's a real new awareness, I think, creeping into the market as to this whole new way of conceiving of monetizing the retail journey. It's this new understanding that fresh, high fidelity, first party audience data is the new currency for media. And weirdly, it's stuff we've been talking about for 20 years. Wouldn't it be great if we had better targeting and better signal and better segments? It's all there. It's always been there. It's just been locked away, in silos from retailers. And suddenly it's sort of really come to the fore. And as a result, you've just had this industry essentially spring out of nothing really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's also the reporting, the attribution promise, that whole stuff, really cool stuff. And you've recently joined Epsilon, part of the Publicis Group. Tell us a bit about your role there and what you've been focused on so far.
So I joined Epsilon as commercial director in June. It's kind of a dual role. So I provide sort of strategic leadership and guidance for our client base, but I also work on partnerships and new business across the region as well. So it's a little bit of everything. I've worked on this sort of vendor side in different sort of media and advertising technology capacities in the past as well. So it's nice bringing a bit of the buying side as well as the selling side experience kind of into that middle point, because it's not just add some tech and you've suddenly got a retail media business. There's a business model. There's a lot of change management. There's go-to-market strategies and brand new ways of operating as a retailer. So I'm kind of fortunate enough, I suppose, that I've kind of got that more rounded background to have conversations beyond just an implementation team to talk more about what it's going to mean to affect an overall business.
Because of that experience that you've got, what is the biggest difference between the worlds that you've been focused on? Where are the biggest misalignments between, ad tech, retailers, publishers, agencies, brands? Where are you seeing the biggest gaps show up?
Honestly, everywhere.
Yep.
Literally everywhere. But I don't say that in a derogatory way, but when you kind of think about it, right? I'm often fond of quoting Melissa Polgace from David Jones on this. David Jones has been a retailer in Australia for 187 years, right? Mm-hmm. The media agency model has existed since at least the early 1900s, pre-World War One. So you've kind of got these really almost sort of sentimentally established business silos that, have kind of operated in proximity to one another, different swim lanes, sometimes different pools. And then all of a sudden we're going, oh, well, in the last 7 years, everything hasn't come together just perfectly. Well, of course it hasn't. Real boats rock.
Yeah.
You've kind of got to accept that there's going to be some tension and some misalignment in the way that they operate. So a retailer, for example, right? So where's retail media sit? Is it a part of a marketing function? Does it sit in trade and merchandising? I mean, that's where the supplier relationships are, right? Do you set it up as a completely separate entity? Do you outsource it? Because you'd realize you don't have the nascent skills to be a media seller. All considerations that really ought to be addressed before you figure out what kind of retail media business you're going to be in. From a brand or an advertiser perspective, how's it funded, right? Is it going to come out of a trade investment? Well, you're already getting the trade investment, so you're not getting anything incremental. Is it new money? I know in our latest State of the Nation IAB Council survey, there was a relatively large percentage that was identified as new money. We haven't found the people who responded to say this is new money yet, but we're looking for them. Is it brand budgets, though? And if it is, has anyone told the marketing team that they're now spending that brand budget that used to be on consumer marketing on, TV and, open internet, and all of a sudden that's now shifting into customer marketing and is going to go back into, the retail and distribution network. So their challenges from an advertiser perspective. Bring in the third part to this of media agencies. Media agencies have to learn and adapt to a whole new, breed of media sellers, if you like, because selling media is not the heartland of a retailer. So they do it very differently than the way media agencies are kind of used to being considered.
Yeah.
I would say to some extent, one area that I think retail media networks have been slightly guilty of is treating media agencies as almost like a blocker or a hurdle to getting to the client, as opposed to the media agency is the client.
Right.
But there's another very weird dynamic here. That 187 years of David Jones, Woolworths and Coles have been selling Coca-Cola since the 50s and 60s, right? So there are trade relationships in place that are like decades old. So that's probably going to give brands and their distributors a much, much closer and longer term relationship than brands and their media agencies. Like Woolworths doesn't pitch for Coca-Cola every 3 years, whereas agencies do. So there's a really shifting different power dynamic between that actual trade. And it's one thing to acknowledge it, but it's a much, much more complicated thing to live within those constraints and then try to figure out what an amicable means of expanding the partnership from simply we buy your product at wholesale to we now sell you advertising on our owned assets. It's more complicated than it seems.
Coming back to your comment in regards to the media agency and the new media team at the retailer, to the retailer's media team, and they're going after the same brand, is the media agency the client or is the media agency now a competitor?
Geez, that's a controversial one. I would like to think, and maybe this is just sort of idealism or a childlike sense of optimism, I would like to think that where the agencies play the biggest role in that type of space is conceiving of where retail media sits in an overall channel plan. And this isn't always fair on the agency because the agency might get that from the big brand block kind of mass awareness aspects of what one of their clients is doing. But if they don't have visibility on how that client is working from a trade perspective,
absolutely,
or where new product development fits in trade, there's a big blind spot that they actually have of positioning retail media within the mix. Now that can result in it being planned inefficiently. It can result in it not being planned at all and added in as an afterthought or just simply not used or just being absorbed back into trade, in which case nobody's really meaning anything in terms of like an incremental spend, incremental value. That's an area that I think that agencies need to bring to the fore a lot more than they are.
Seems to be strong collaboration really there.
Yeah, look, the collaboration's been there. Like I said, you've had brands and retailers collaborating for like decades. Agencies are just new to the mix and they just need to figure out where they add value. And they obviously do because they have,
of course,
more understanding of where all of these channels fit and unite for a more integrated omni-channel communications plan. I'm not just sort of throwing out the jargon. That's what it's all kind of supposed to be. I'll give you a little tangible example, I suppose. If, for example, harking back to Endeavour Group and mix in, Father's Day would be about whiskey a lot because clearly everybody buys whiskey for their dads for Father's Day. So if all trade communications from Dan Murphy's going out in August and September are all about whiskey, 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 then June and July needs to be where retail media is deployed to build salience and familiarity and awareness with particular whiskey brands. Because a niche brand will get shouted down by the volume of trade, and it'll be too late once someone's in the front doors. You want to prime a shopper for that journey, make them sort of consider something outside their normal consideration set, take them off autopilot to consider these new whiskey brands and whatnot that they might have seen through this additional communication prior to the fact. That's the opportunity to build a brand. Now, where I see an agency's role in that would be to say, right, when are we in market with brand communications? Where's trade sitting in relation to that? And what space is there to weave retail media in between to leverage the presence that we have across both those channels?
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Lachlan. I think the other thing for me is the media agency's role is we all serve the client. There's lots of clients asking if retail media is providing incrementality, to your point before, where they've got these existing trade relationships for so long. Now they're moving into the retail media space. How are they showing incrementality? How are they serving the clients' other objectives other than getting shelf space and other bits and pieces? And I think, retail media leading into the agencies, these guys are the experts at that. They're able to show where the incrementality could be. And like you said, getting it to coordinate with the rest of the plan. I mean, that's where you get 1 + 1 = 6, and you're not just getting the thing. I suppose just unpacking things a bit more as well. We've talked in the past about that rich data set that the retail media guys have. So, measurement becomes really interesting. Targeting, we mentioned before, but also, utilizing that data set for offsite inventory is also becoming the realm of the retail media networks. Certainly something that we must declare from a Voodoo perspective, we're really interested in. So how do you see, retail media's networks now scaling into the commerce media ecosystem, and where do you see that at the moment? Who's doing it well?
I think everyone's having various stabs at it, but kind of like what I said, I think in my first point, all of this comes with that realization that you need to unlock first party audience data, democratize it to some extent, obviously within legal and ethical and governance, parameters. That's the most important thing in this. A colleague once said to me, the whole point of retail media is to accompany the customer journey and not to detract from it.
I like that.
There's a lot to unpack in that fairly simple statement, because that customer journey obviously doesn't begin at the storefront or when you visit an e-commerce website. So what role can a retailer play further up the stream? And that's where I think the synergy between that off-site strategy and the means to better engage through, say, maybe more dynamic creative than would be sensible to run on a retailer's own website. So if you take, I guess, an example of like Voodoo with off-site stuff, for example, you could be running really highly engaging video ads from someone on a contextual environment where it's content that they like, not necessarily directly related to their chosen retailer. But if you've identified that person as a frequent shopper at retailer X, it kind of makes sense to engage them in that environment and, again, prime them for the shop.
Absolutely.
So that's how I kind of see it fitting.
Lachlan will be here promoting Voodoo all week.
That's, yeah, you guys didn't even send me a t-shirt. I would say in that as well, though, some of that offsite extension is born from necessity.
Yep.
Because you can't just keep cramming ads into what is your sales channel, right? There gets a point where you start to detract from the actual sales path with too many ads or too many options. And realistically in Australia, on a great month, e-commerce is maybe 20% of total audience for a retailer. Not because we suck at e-commerce, we're just really good at bricks and mortar.
Absolutely.
Right? We have a fantastic high street. We have a fantastic mall experience. We also have the tyranny of our geography, which has made it really hard for that 1 hour delivery that you get through Europe, US, and Asia, right? So as a result, that's kind of the dynamic of the market that we need to play with. So if you can accept, rightly or wrongly, that you'll only ever get a fifth of your total audience as your e-commerce audience, and if you then looked at the cadence of their shop, so grocery might be different, right? Grocery, you might get that audience on a weekly basis. But if you're a department store or a more specialized vertical, you might only get a shop 3, 4, 5 times a year. So any given month is then a subset of that total pool of 20%, right? So that reach might not be extensive. You could have an enormous loyalty base or, just accessible area of first party data. You simply just won't be able to activate all of them on a regular basis just using on-site channels. Whereas off-site, for every impression that you might generate on a JB Hi-Fi, you'll be doing tens of thousands across your normal web surfing behavior, whether it's, TikTok or Meta or reading the news or whatever else. So when you've got the means to identify and match that individual to journeys out there on the open internet, that 20% reach goes up to close to 100% reach. That's valuable not just for the retailer, but for the suppliers who want to influence shoppers,
Yeah, absolutely. Something we want to get into, retail media is really starting to kind of hit its peak. Is it? That's a question in itself. That maturity curve, feels like we're approaching it. From your perspective, and you've kind of been in this little while now, and we're seeing there's something like 700 retail media networks globally, right? We've been talking consolidation recently with some guests and, offline. From your perspective, are we at peak retail media, or are we going to see some consolidation? We had Kelly Weirmouth talking about seeing some consolidation on a recent podcast we did with her, an episode. What's your take? Where are we at?
I don't want to just completely disagree with Kelly because she's one floor down from me and she'll tell me all about it.
Part of the publicist family.
Yeah, I'll play nice. I think if there is maturity in the market, it's definitely not evenly distributed at all.
No, that's fair.
For a number of reasons. And I think the first being a lot of retailers are still nervous or nascent around that accessibility to first-party data because they recognize the importance of it. Misusing that audience data is not just losing a signal or losing a visitor, it's losing a customer. And you lose a customer to a competitor and they never come back if they have a good experience. So there's a lot on the table. But I'd say for that reason, I don't think we've hit that inflection point where we can say, all right, we're into phase 2 or phase 3 of our sort of development of retail media. I think as well, that tipping point will come when more retailers are cognizant of what they are actually selling. So if you were to say to me that we sell ad inventory and we've got screens in a shop and banners on a website and sponsored product links, I would say you're leaving money on the table. And this kind of, I guess, sort of relates back to my first kind of wafty comment there. If you said something like, I find ways to respectfully monetize the relationship that I've built with my customers over many years. Okay, now you're piquing my attention because now you're not limited to that one banner or that one click. You're now thinking of ways to engage with more than just the visitors on your website on a month. You're talking about engaging with any visitor who's ever transacted with you, which is multiples of your potential reach. That's quite the paradigm shift for a lot of retailers because a lot have been sold on the early drug of build it, they will come. Stick a couple of screens in here, there, and everywhere, and you suddenly have a retail media network. But then all of the opening questions come up. How's this funded? Is it trade or brand? I just unlocked all this capital, and I seem to be just cannibalizing my trade media.
Yeah.
Unless it's all conceived in that initial kind of business planning, it's not growth. And if it's not growth, it's not a mature market. It's kind of just those kind of really early suck it and see type of stages.
What I liked about that statement, Lachlan, as well, is that it had the kind of authenticity of working with brands in the right space, not just plastering ads on screens for the sake of it. It's that authenticity of the right to play with that relationship that you spoke to is, I think, where retail media's networks work really well. Not having that really, like you were talking about it before with relation to the digital assets, there's a certain point where there's too much distraction and you're distracting from the retail journey. So that's what I loved about your comment there.
Yeah, the retail journey is a really interesting point about guiding the retailer or the consumer.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things in that, and this is to one of your earlier points as well, Paul. When you bring media agencies into the mix or you bring more of the marketing analysis from brands who are doing this directly, there's going to be a question about performance. And so if it really is just a matter of, putting more screens or banners in order to just kind of monetize a customer journey and you're not thinking about what additional performance this adds, you put a really difficult strain on a relationship that's not going to go away, right? You still have to trade together. There is still a deeper relationship that now just has this kind of awkward layer on top of it where like, hey, I know you want me to spend more money on retail media, but you're either not providing the data to support that or the numbers just aren't sort of stacking up. That's complicated more, I guess, when you bring media agencies into the mix as well. And not sort of to the side of that as well as you've got a customer journey going, my God, all I want to do is get to the checkout. I don't need more ads. I don't need more suggestive selling.
And more data. You spoke to, at the start of our conversation, you spoke to the fact that we've got businesses, legacy businesses here going back 100 years or so. We know about data, all the signals, the intent. Do you think there's a challenge there with regards to the brands are saying and the retailer saying, we want you to spend more money on retail media, we want you to do all this, and the brand saying, well, yeah, but give me more of what's going on, share. And do you think that's a real struggle for the retailers to get to share some of that key data?
Again, I think this is one that sort of comes to the fore more now that media agencies are in the mix. Data is shared between retailers and suppliers since time immemorial, right? Like a supplier is always going to get their sales data to some degree. There are questions that come from media agencies who are probably less experienced in the trade side of things. Well, they ask questions that the answer is no, you can't have that because it's probably commercially sensitive. So, for example, I wouldn't necessarily trade category share data with a supplier because that would impede my trade negotiations with. Whereas an agency might ask that thinking that, well, if I had a dominant share of category, do I want to target either consumers that are new to category or occasionalist in category or something along those kind of lines? I can see the argument for both sides, but ultimately a retailer is going to sit on the side of, what powers the entirety of their business. And, like it or lump it, those trade relationships are still vital to
absolutely
the existence of, the entire ecosystem. So they're going to, I guess, override any decisions around retail media. It'd be a weird day where the retail media team is sharing data above and beyond what a merchandising or a trade team would be sharing with their own negotiations with suppliers.
Yeah, gotcha.
You just don't like hearing no.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Who does?
You can't have that.
Look, Paul and I were geared up for today. We knew you were going to bring it, and you were definitely bringing it, so I appreciate it. Love the honesty. Let's kind of change. We'll kind of lead on from there. But the IAB's recent, Commerce and Retail Media Summit in Australia, you mentioned RMNs typically reach just 20% of their customer base. Now, Paul touched on this before. How should retailers and brands be thinking about offsite, but really strategically? Because I think we need to unpack this a little bit more because obviously Voodoo has an interest in this, but we're having this conversation in multiple regions and jurisdictions globally, and it's the same conversation. We're exhausting it. We need to go offsite. We've got issues with margin erosion. We want to go offsite. So how should we strategically look at this? What are the levers we should pull? Give me your thoughts. I know you can have a great opinion on this.
The margin erosion thing makes me laugh because sorry, I'm playing back a conversation on this that I definitely cannot share on a podcast. But if you look, there's retail media on site, right? There's a trade margin. If you're being an honest retailer, you've got all of that space for offsite, right? So even if you've got to buy ads, which you obviously do as part of an offsite activation, you've still got quite a bit of headroom. Yes, it's going to be lower than your margins for on-site or in-store because you own the assets. You're not paying for the media, right?
Yeah.
But there's the inherent value that your data brings to that trade. And there's also, like I explained before, there's also 5 times the audience that you're able to reach. So that should be ticking a box from an absolute revenue number.
Mm-hmm.
You can reach them more regularly. You can plan bigger amounts that get this kind of up into more of the longer term trading agreements that, agencies and brand teams like to sign off. Like, I'm going to do a laydown plan of offsite media with retailer X as opposed to spot campaign buy. So you can kind of pad your year out with more forward revenue, which is generally useful for people. You also start to then migrate that audience journey away from point of sale or pure performance to more consideration and awareness type of stages. Now, this, I guess, kind of syncs up with the notion of whether retail media is a brand building channel or a performance channel. And I would kind of counter that by, well, you can build a brand with coffee cup advertising if you really want to.
Yep.
It's not efficient, but that's kind of the point. It's not whether it works or not. It's the degree to which it works. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say I am a popular confectionery brand and I am ranged exclusively at one retailer. And there are loads of examples of brands like that. Where would I start building my brand? As a new entrant to market with limited budgets, where would I build the brand? Surely it would be where customers of that retailer are. So first port of call would probably be all the on-site and on, their owned assets. But if I could then take that and say, well, now I need to build outwards to influence and inform those people that I actually exist and that their chosen retailer is the place where they can buy me, that's an obvious offsite extension.
Yeah.
Right? Why build a brand anywhere else if you're distributed exclusively through one retailer? And it's not an edge case. I'm not just kind of using that because it's convenient. But then that works for brands that are, nationally distributed by multiple retailers as well, because they still face competition in their categories. So the ability to still target someone that is either in market, in category, a loyalist, a competitor's loyalist, and shape your messaging around that, I think is essential to the way that these brands can sort of thrive and survive. And offsite, I think, gives you even more power to that, because you can stick stuff into offsite creative that retail media networks are never going to allow on site. Much more freedom, creative expression.
You're pretty good at this.
Yeah, you're pretty good at this.
You're pretty good at this, Lachlan. I mean, with the next segue was into brand versus performance, and you're sort of answering our questions for us as we go. You're making my job pretty easy. But maybe just because if we could just double down into it, I mean, the retailers partnering well with brands, it means that brands can do brand campaigns, but also ask for the money, right?
Of course, yeah.
And that's what I think is really interesting about retail media networks offsite, is going to extend to audiences that are in the market for a product. The retailer wins because the brand's, hitting their target market, and the brand spending the money driving that business incrementally in some cases to the retailers. I think that's a really interesting play. And like you said, they've got data to contribute to that, to make sure that you're hitting the right target, and they've got the measurement capabilities. This is the bit I'm really excited about. And yes, I'm now at Voodoo, joined from News Corp, so there's a vested interest in talking about this, but I just think it's a really interesting opportunity for the ecosystem.
Mate, I agree. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think you should be looking at campaigns to say, oh, this is all about brand or this is all about performance.
Not anymore.
If you want a deal breaker's perspective on that, ask a CFO.
Bang on.
They're going to want to measure irrespective of what you think you're actually kind of planning for. Again, I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but ultimately I think it comes back again to how you can leverage the audience data to make for that better journey. So again, if I want to create awareness of my brand, I would be looking at where I sit. I'd be probably using my trade numbers and looking at where I sit relative to my competitors in category. Do I have seasonal uplifts on my particular product? If I can get to that layer of kind of transactional data, out of all my sales, how many look like they're regular buyers? So putting the wanky retail terms on it, what's the average inter-purchase interval? So we buy Wheat Bix every 6 weeks, right? But we might buy, we might buy coffee every week. So there's all of these different little dynamics that you could apply to the way you plan a campaign. Showing me Wheat Bix ads every week is an absolute waste of time.
Yeah.
If I generally buy it mid to end of month, timing the kind of wake up call, don't forget to buy Wheat Bix appropriately to my shopping journey is the best way to leverage that. Now, does that need to necessarily exist on site? Yeah, it's probably pretty good, but offsite as well can also be that, brand driven, awareness, consideration driven reminder. Now, take my scenario there and then filter that by someone who's not like me, who doesn't buy Wheat Bix. Okay, so I might need a higher frequency of advertising with them to influence them away from whatever it is they're buying to trial. And again, I would generally think that the data is available to support that, whether through trade or through retail media, to go, Well, have I increased the pool of regular buyers? Have I introduced new people to the category, and am I capitalizing, on top of that? All of this is a function of both measuring performance and planning to brand building parameters. The advantage that you have with the retail media side, though, is that you get closed loop attribution. You do get proximity to point of purchase. You do get that more granular targeting that is based on product preferences and transactional history rather than inference.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's parts of it to leverage, but it's not just going to all be about that end sale point. There's a lot of different things to measure. Paul, you mentioned incrementality before. I hate when people say incrementality. And
Yeah, Paul.
well, only because I just think it's generic.
Now, let's unpack this one because we've had a few people on the podcast this is a key theme that seems to be coming out when talking about retail media networks, and particularly from the client side, it seems to be the call from them saying, hey, show me the incrementality if you're asking for more than my trade budget and you want my media budget. So, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinion on this.
I agree with you. I just think be specific about it. It's like going to a restaurant and saying, how would you like your steak? Nice.
Fair.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I want incrementality. Okay, what are you doing part of your planning to facilitate it? So like I said before, are we getting incrementality by changing occasional buyers into regular buyers? Are we changing regular buyers into loyal buyers? Are we introducing new people to the category? Each one of those examples could potentially require a different messaging and communication strategy, not just a different targeting strategy. So when you say the I word, I want to unpack that with clients and say, what do you think you mean by it?
Yeah.
Or how do I work with you
to
try and figure out what the best strategy to generate it would be?
It's not incrementality as a concept that you have the problem with. It's they're not being specific around what you're actually trying to do that's driving that incrementality.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's certain categories where you just can't sell more stuff to people, right?
Yeah.
They've kind of exhausted it. So if you want incremental sales, you've either got to introduce new people to it, or you've got to be au fait enough with your data to be able to identify, well, if my regular purchase looks like one every 4 weeks, can I find a chunk of people who buy once every 8?
And bring them into 1 to 4.
That and target. So, yeah, I've no problem with the desire to get more sales than you were getting. I just think be specific and be open to how you are going to plan and accommodate that and measure it, because it won't be just that point in time as well. I didn't get enough clicks, therefore it's a failure. It will be, well, I'm going to need to look at the trajectory of my sales and see if I'm getting, more in what used to be a low week, for example, and start to measure that a little bit more holistically as well.
Don't mention the I word. That's going to be a great call out. I love it.
You get your catchphrase from me. Nice.
Catchphrase.
I'm hearing if you mention it, be specific around what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, 100%.
It's an extremely fair call. Yeah.
Whose responsibility is it at the end of the day? Is it the way you plan the campaign? Is it the product itself? Is it the reach that the retailer can provide as part of the campaign? I'd say it's everything. Incrementality is not an ask from a brand to a retailer to solve for them. It is a concept that all parties involved in the trade need to leverage their smarts and their assets to solve.
Yep. And as we were saying before, maybe this is a place where the media agencies can help play a role too.
Absolutely.
Connecting the dots and showing incrementality. But again, to your point, it's around understanding the data points that are commercial in confidence, because I think that's where there's a tension point sometimes is you've got the data, why can't you share it? So we didn't double down on that point that you made, but I found that really interesting that, yeah, of course the retailer can't share information across category because that, like you said, it's part of their core business and it's, you can't share that sort of data.
I think a great segue into this is around a recurring theme of measurement and greater transparency across the entire footprint from media agency to retail media to network to the brand. From your perspective, what are some of those just glaring blind spots? I'm sure you know what they are. Are you comfortable about kind of like zeroing in on them? And what are some of the steps we need, like as an industry, to really kind of tackle some of those blind spots?
I reckon my answer might disappoint you on this one a bit, Nick. I don't think the issue is transparency. I think the issue is granularity,
Right.
and a mismatch of expectations and language.
I'm not disappointed. This is good.
I don't necessarily think suppliers are expecting more data than what they're already getting through the trade relationships that they have. I mean, if there was more that would be shared, it's in a retailer and the supplier's best interest to already be discussing that, whether it's activated or leveraged through retail media or not. I don't know if there is anything opaque in that. And again, this is a little bit like the incrementality kind of argument. I kind of went quietly nuts to myself when I saw some of the State of the Nation things saying, some of the verbatims that said things like retailers need to be more transparent. Like, what the hell does that even mean? Like, it's so generic that you can't action anything from it. And that's what kind of annoys me about it.
Transparent in what and where? Like, you keep saying and you're right, you're saying granularity, but be open and share more of what exactly? Because some things they can, and a lot of it commercially they can't.
That's what annoys me about it, because you can't action anything on that. You can only just keep whinging about it and say that, what that conversation begets is more people saying, yeah, you're right, there needs to be more transparency. But no one actually goes, kind of, time out, guys. What do we mean? What is the non-transparent part to this that we have going on? If you were to say to me, to our early example, I need more understanding of where incremental sales are coming from. Great. Let's now look at different audience segments. Let's dive in a more granular means into the actual transactions you're getting and see if we spot some patterns. This is where MMM models kill it, because they can provide that level of granularity whilst still being essentially anonymized to make better decisions at a channel level. Is that reducible down to just retail media? I don't know. It's not my sort of field of expertise. But one area that I've kind of now raised with the Retail Media Council, because we've circled around this stuff in numerous studies of whether, of transparency and reporting on this and whatever else. I just thought, why don't we've put out a lot of different material, whether it's the State of the Nation studies or other surveys and glossaries and, how-to guides and getting started guides. Why don't we just write a brief template?
Yeah, right.
So this is my new big thing for the council, because we've got tech vendors on it, we've got buyers, we've got the retail media networks, we've got associated agencies and partners that all play around the space. Surely we've got the brain space to kind of say, well, this is what we think should contribute to the ultimate media brief for retail media. That way, the retailer knows exactly what's being asked of them. The agency or the brand know what's off the table, because the retail media network can kind of put in its kind of limitations or, the degree to which data can be supplied, and everything can be planned accordingly within established, well understood and well socialized parameters. I think transparency becomes manifest when people's expectations are not met. And I don't think their expectations are met because I don't think they're clear in the first place.
Oh, I like that idea, Lachlan. And I'm hoping you're going to table that in our council meeting this afternoon, because I'd be
coming in hard.
I'd be happy to second it and happy to work with it as well, with one exception. Given the IAB has recently changed their definition for the council or thing from, I guess, retail media networks to commerce media, I guess I'd like to see it with vested interest to see a commerce media brief rather than just a retail media network brief. I'm happy to be challenged on that. I'm sure you will. But yeah, I mean, where do you see the definition in the overlap between, I suppose, retail media and commerce media?
Look, I probably don't make as much distinction as the people who have more of a vested interest in either space do. My experience in it tells me that what you tend to get more from the retailer themselves is more SKU level closed loop attribution. That's quite hard from a commerce media perspective. And I say that from the perspective of having, launched Cashrewards retail media network as well. Getting SKU level data back from 2,500 merchants is really, really complicated. And it doesn't necessarily match up. They have different product codes and SKU codes and all sorts of different stuff. So I think they're probably going after two different ends, I think, to some extent. Like, we've sort of talked that incrementality side of, like occasional, regular, loyal and whatnot. At a SKU level, that's really possible with a retailer. I don't think you get that the same with kind of a broader commerce network. What you might see is people that via our platform have never bought your product before. Okay, so we might be introducing newness to the category. But going down to that SKU level, I think, is probably the part that a commerce network struggles with. The other difference I'd say, because I'm not trying to make a spreadsheet of like pros and cons for both, commerce media networks just tend to be much more reliant on that notion of, decentralized or offsite media, because the commerce platform itself is not necessarily a destination, whereas a retailer is.
Okay.
That's fair.
I'd keep it as simple as that.
No, that's fair. So in your retail media brief template, though, would you include what we should do off network for the retail media network? Would you have that as part of the brief too?
Probably less what we should do. It would be more what the capabilities are and what the limitations are. So retail media and commerce media could both provide a robust off-network solution. I think where you'd probably be comparing them would be what effective reach can we generate? And that's not necessarily just a matter of, identifiable data from one partner. It's how that actually matches, with DSPs or with, other signal data to actually identify those people, around the open internet. There'll be variances there. Often retailers, I think, kind of struggle if they don't have enough data, because if you've got 500,000 people that you're trying to identify on the open internet, your match rate might be quite low. Commerce media has an advantage over that in that because they're taking in signal data from multiple retailers, the likelihood of a higher match rate is higher. But that said, you won't have as high a fidelity of signal coming back because you're not going to get SKU level data or anything like that.
Great take.
Great takes.
They both have a role. They both have a role to play. There's no question they have a role to play.
Yeah.
They both offer robust targeting. They both offer some degree of closed loop attribution.
Lachlan, this has been a great conversation, and I love that you're firm with your perspectives and your opinions. It makes for, as I said, a great conversation. As the inaugural chair of IAB, Australian Retail Media Council, you've got this incredible bird's eye view of all the players in the market. Yes, this is going to be a big question. What are some of your observations, and what are the biggest gaps do you think you're going to target? What are you setting out to address?
The best role that we can play, I think, continues to be education.
Yeah.
Right. And try to, what's the old saying? A rising tide lifts all ships.
We couldn't agree more.
Big believer of that.
Industry bodies should be the ones that sort of bring everyone up to level. I guess I occupy an interesting space in this because I try to sort of step back from the industry body perspective. But, a lot of these platforms are also my clients on the Epsilon sort of side of things. So it's kind of walking that balance of like, I want everybody to gain the knowledge, and then how that's applied, well, I just have to switch off that side of my brain for certain parts of my day. What challenges me, I guess, and where I would like to see us as an industry council sort of doing more, I find a lot of trade material and a lot of LinkedIn sort of commentary is really the news of retail media, as opposed to actionable sort of insights or analysis or interpretation, right? And APAC is a very interesting region compared to the rest of the world because it doesn't unite in a similar way. You can produce a deck in Europe, translated in the same kind of material, generally works around most countries. There is so much more cultural nuance and difference to the way that customers expect retail to work throughout APAC. The same material doesn't work in, much more than 3 markets at once. Right? I can give you loads of examples of that, but I will. Indonesia, mobile first market. Something like 70% of internet usage in Indonesia is exclusively mobile. So how the hell does that change a retail media proposition? Well, it scales it down a lot by virtue of a fairly small screen. So most of what we talk about in terms of, here's the rows of sponsored product that you're going to do and here's how all of this stuff works, it just does not fit the consumer experience. So whilst you're getting all this information of here's the latest and greatest happening in Europe, how does that translate to our markets? This, I think, is pertinent. I am looping this back to something. This, I think, is pertinent when we come to that data conversation and things like, we want to see more case studies. There's 27 million of us in Australia, and we have for a very long time been a market of duopolies. We've got a Coles and a Woolworths. We used to have a Ford and a Holden. We have a Telstra and Optus. We have a Qantas and a Virgin. We generally have 2 big tier ones in most categories, right? So how is it in anyone's interest for them to be sharing? Because all they're really doing is countenancing a rival. So I wouldn't say it's a limiting factor. It's just the nature of the market that we've existed in always. So I'm always very conscious of what information we see overseas or what evidence we see of sort of growth or maturity overseas. We really need to be more conscious about bringing that back to Australia and saying, when it hits the ground here, these are the 5 considerations that will localize this and make it work from our market.
Yeah, how's it applied? What's valid?
Because otherwise, you know what we like with technology here as well. We see a twinkly object and we're all over it. That almost holds us back from that maturity curve. Because that's kind of like saying, well, I implemented this and it didn't work. Therefore, retail media doesn't work for my business. Versus I looked at the technology. I worked out the nuances that will make it work for the Australian market. I went in eyes wide open and I grew from a hypothesis through to a more mature exposition of how that should work, as opposed to expecting, I'm going to be making a mozza from day one. I reckon we missed that layer in the middle, and that's what I really hope the council is sort of starting to fulfill a bit more.
Great answer.
Yeah, that's a great insight and a great answer. I appreciate that.
So, Lachlan, we like to finish off our podcast. You've been fantastic with your time and some really insightful answers and questions. Some great stuff.
Amazing.
This is a little bit more fun and easy. So it's a quick fire round of questions. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to put some words out for word association, and we just like to get back your answers.
Sounds harder than the first part.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
It might be. Okay, so we're going to get into it. What was the last thing that you bought online?
Whey protein.
Oh, nice.
Protein. Good.
What podcast are you currently listening to? Obviously, you don't have to say the one that's obvious that Commerce Media Matters, but what other podcasts are you currently listening to?
I'm going to totally nerd out for this one and show you a side that I don't normally. I'm quite a Dungeons and Dragons fan.
Stop it.
I've got a lot of mates going back into my high school era and sort of new friends that I've made. I listen to like the Dimension 20 and Critical Role podcasts and shows.
You're right into it, aren't you, Lachlan? You're right into it.
I'm very, very
I can
into
tell.
it.
Good for you.
Stuff you never would have guessed. Okay, quick word association. I'll say a word and you tell me what you think of. Credit card.
Platinum.
AI.
Hype.
Oh, look, we almost got through a whole podcast without talking about AI specifically, but we're back to it.
We could unpack that.
Okay. And last question. Do you TikTok? And if you do, are you a watcher or a poster?
Oh, I'm more of a lurker. I didn't realize I actually had a TikTok account. I think I set one up in like a previous role because I had clients that were advertising on it. I'd say I'm probably more lurker / watcher. What's fascinating me now, and I'm sure this is going to be a retail media topic in the coming months, I think the live commerce and social commerce space, to me, that's more important to retail media than agentic shopping and AI and the rest of it, because this is not a bot changing the way we shop. This is a whole new facet of customer and consumer behavior.
Yep.
It is a whole new way for brands to engage with people en masse. I watched a stream, I think it was only this week, it was a beauty and fashion brand, I think, that did something like $2.7 million in sales in a matter of hours through their live streaming. And I think this is a very interesting frontier that is yet to be explored from a retail media proposition. So I have some vested interests in this area, so I'm watching it closely.
Great.
Well, Lachlan, you're on point with your answers already. One of the ones I missed was what do you see as the new things that are coming up? And I think you just answered it there. Thank you so much for joining us on the session on Commerce Media Matters. We've had a great time, and I'll see you later on at the Retail Media Council.
Indeed, you will. Look, really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk. Thank you to Voodoo. Thanks to everyone who's kind of, subscribed and listened and has kind of orchestrated this and produced behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Lachlan.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho, Meg Lirsch, and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.